Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We have a special guest, if you will. Recently, there's been a little bit of discourse back and forth on social media, and I put out a video with constructive criticism, if you will, towards something that I saw. Chad Jackson, who's another Black conservative, responded. And so we messaged each other, said, hey, let's have a conversation about this. So we're going to keep this civil, articulate, intelligent, and have a very frank conversation about racism in this country, and also the comments that we both made. So if we can now, if we want to bring him in. I don't see any video. Is he there? Chad, you there? I think he was on a second ago. I don't know if there's some technical difficulties. We'll see. While we're waiting, I'll just go ahead. If we want to go ahead and get rid of that screen, I'll just go ahead and talk about some stuff that we've been seeing in the news while we're waiting to get everything squared away to bring Chad on and have our conversation. So a couple of things happened this week. First, yesterday, tragically, the former Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Abe, was unfortunately assassinated while he was giving a campaign speech. What's interesting about this is that in Japan, they have very strict gun laws. The only people who are allowed to have guns in Japan are the military and the police. And it appears from initial images and video of what happened, it appears that there was some sort of homemade device that launched projectiles, bullets, something like that. It might have been 3D printing. We don't know for sure yet. They're still investigating. But what we do know is that there's a very unfortunate passing yesterday of the former prime minister. Also yesterday, we saw the resignation of Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the UK. This came after several of his cabinet members began resigning. This is very interesting. We're going to see how this unfolds in the United Kingdom, which is one of our country's biggest allies. Also in the news this week, Brittany Griner, WNBA basketball star who was arrested and detained in Russia for the illegal possession of marijuana cartridges, vape pens, pled guilty, actually. Earlier in the week, we saw her, I think it was like Tuesday, her wife sent out a message on social media asking the current administration, the Biden administration, to do something, see what they could do. The very next day, the current president put out a message saying that he's working very hard to try and secure the release. There's been discussions and talks of potential hostage trade. One person who came up is an arms dealer, Russian arms dealer, who's been in jail for over 15 years here in the United States. Then the very next day, Brittany Griner pled guilty in court. Ironically, the Houston Chronicle put out saying that, according to Russian law, pleading guilty isn't exactly pleading guilty. Don't really understand that, as well as some other things, how boys can be girls and girls can be boys. But I guess now in our country, you can plead guilty and not be guilty. We're going to keep following up on that and see what that looks like. Also, very interestingly, thousands of barrels of our reserve oil has been or is being shipped over to Europe. This is very frustrating considering gas in the United States is almost averaging in some places over $5 throughout the country. This strategic oil reserve is meant to be used for us, United States citizens, when prices are high. The Biden administration and the press secretary keep saying that these rises in gas prices are due to the Putin price hike. I don't know how the president of another country can put a tax on our economy and our gas, but that's neither here nor there. But don't understand how we're sending our oil over to aid allies when it's needed so desperately here in the United States. This just continues to go to show the current trend of this administration being very out of touch with what's going on in the United States. It looks like the current administration is not listening to what the people really need and want. And that's probably part of the reason why the current president has such horrible ratings. So it looks like Chad is good to go, is ready to come on. Can we go ahead and bring him in? There he is. How's it going, Chad?
Good. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you great. You still in Texas?
I am.
Okay. All right, great. So before we get started, just a couple things. I put out and said I'd be willing to donate $1,000 to a random student in Baltimore's community college system, and asked for you in return, if I'm right in this civil debate that we're going to have, to donate $1,000 to the Jack Brewer Foundation. I'm just wondering, are we going to do that or no?
No.
Okay. All right. That's totally fine. I'll go ahead and.
I'm fine just having a discussion with you without any transaction of money or anything like that.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fine. I figured as much, but I'll go ahead and take care of that and just do that on my own, because I definitely think that Baltimore, being an impoverished city, that some good things should happen, right? And neither you or I should be, betting money between each other. We should do something good with it. So I'll go ahead and take care of that. And I'll also go ahead and help out the Jack Brewer Foundation, which helps returning citizens get back to life. And I have a company on my own. I think you have one too. I have a company that helps minorities and veterans, I'm not going to say the name and plug it, develop passive income streams. So we said, $1,000. So I think at a private client level, that's about 10 people. I'm going to go ahead and give that to them for free. I'm going to give 10 people from the Jack Brewer Foundation access to my platform for free. So something good will actually come of this.
How virtuous of you.
Yeah. No. So this is what we'll do. Let's go ahead and I'll let you go first. I already said what I said. I already explained to you how I felt about it, and I'll go ahead and let you respond and clarify for me how I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of thoughts that go through my head, if I'm being completely honest with you. It was kind of a surprise to see that you made that video. I would venture to say that your brand of conservatism is in line with, I guess, the Glenn Lowrys and the Coleman Hugheses and such and so forth. Am I right in that assumption?
Absolutely not, but go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, my brand of conservatism isn't this kind of hyper intellectual conservatism, which at its base yields and shares in some of the basic assumptions that Black liberals have. For me, I don't really buy their narrative. And so because I don't buy their narrative, I don't really apologize or acquiesce to some of the things that they acquiesce to. I don't believe that systemic racism is the biggest threat to Black people in this country. And so I don't pretend like it's this boogeyman that we have to be afraid of. I do believe that we do live in a very mobile society. And as such, there's opportunities rendered to everyone, regardless of what their skin color is. The question is whether a person will utilize those opportunities or not, or whether they'll continue to be paranoid, be it because of race, because of whatever factor or intersectionality or intersection that we find ourselves in. I do believe that all one must do is basically determine within themselves and to gain the skills and the credentials they need to make it, and they can make it. And so I wholeheartedly believe that. My issue is when conservatives of different breeds come along and say, well, there is racism, there is this, there is that, there is this boogeyman and that boogeyman, and they pretend like it's this big threat, but yet at the same time they claim that they're conservatives, and they don't realize the how should I say it? They don't realize that they're being counterproductive in this kind of double-minded way of speaking. Either there's opportunity or there's not. Is basically what it boils down to.
So you're saying there's either opportunity or there's not. You can't have opportunity but still have racism?
Well, so why is racism such a big deal to you?
No, I'm not saying it's a big deal. Well, it is a big deal because I'm black and I live in America, and there's a lot of racism here, and I live in the third most racist state in the
Where
country.
you,
So
and I've
it is
heard you
a
say
deal.
that numerous I've heard you say that numerous times, and I don't mean to cut you off. It's the most racist state. Like where are you getting that from?
Third most racist. I'll send you the link. You can Google it.
No, no, no. Like, but
If you
we're
look at it, in 2022, the
mhm.
state of Maryland was ranked the third most racist state. I don't have it sitting here in front of me. I just said that I can send it to you. I'm more than happy to send you that link.
And
But
I'm
in
not denying that that's the case. I'm just asking, like, okay, who determined and on what basis did they determine that it's the most racist state? I mean, it's easy to say that, but on what basis are we determining
I,
that it's the
I,
third most
I,
racist state?
I just told you I looked at it, I researched it. I'll send you the link. I can't quote it for you right now.
Well, I'm not asking you
The
to quote
third,
it from me. I'm asking you, what are the factors that determine that it's the third most racist
I,
state?
I just told you this is the fourth time now. I don't have it in front of me. I'll be happy to send it to you.
From your own observation as a man
You
who lives in
can you
Baltimore,
can
what do you
I don't live in Baltimore. I don't live in Baltimore. I just live north of DC in North Bethesda.
and
So
is that where you grew up?
like I said, no, it's not where I grew up. I'm an army
No, no, no,
brat.
I'm saying where you are now, where you just said you live now, is that where you grew up? Like,
No,
what's your frame of reference? Like, where did you grow up?
I'm an army brat.
Okay, so you grew up all over the place.
I was born in Virginia. Then we moved to Germany for 4 years. Then we moved to Texas, no, Fort Riley, Kansas. Then we moved back to Germany. Then we moved to Fort Bliss, Texas. Then we moved to Fort Monroe, Virginia. Then we moved to Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Then we went to the Rock Island Arsenal in Illinois. And then we went to back to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where I graduated high school and joined the Marine Corps.
Okay, all right, now go on. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, so I was just responding to what you're saying. Is I'm happy to send you the link with all the data, and you can look at it for yourself. But the state of Maryland is consistently ranked, a very racist state. My father's from Georgia. My family's moved around quite a bit, so we've always gone back to Georgia. So I briefly ran for Congress in Georgia, so I'm very well aware that
I knew you
racism
looked familiar.
is alive and well in the United States. And so I do think that
Qualify
it is
that
a
though.
qualify what?
You say racism is alive and well in the United States. Qualify that.
Yeah, racism is alive and well in the United States.
What does that mean?
The last known lynching, I believe, in the United States was in, I think, one of the Dakotas in 2017.
Okay, so
That's how recent somebody was lynched here in the United States. And typically, what we've seen, especially in the South, is very well known. I think you're in Texas. I know there's a lot of race. You're saying qualify. You're saying as though to me like you've never experienced racism as a black man.
I haven't.
Really, you've never experienced racism. You've never been called the N-word.
So I'm sorry.
I'm not. It's not funny. It's not a laughing matter.
It is funny. It is funny. It's funny because it's like you guys pretend like
who's you
black
guys?
people are so oppressed in this country.
There is no you guys, bro. You're talking to me. All right. Harrison Floyd. That's number one. Okay. Number two, I'm not, and I've never said that racism is the biggest issue in this country. It is a issue. It is a big issue. It's not the biggest. I think it's probably like maybe 7 or 8 down the list. But from my position where I've been and where I've seen, and from the experiences that I've had, I do see a lot of black conservatives act like racism is non-existent in this country.
Okay, so we're having a conversation.
It's ridiculous and laughable, and it is actually counterproductive to solving a lot of the issues that involve race, and it's counterproductive to getting more people who aren't right-minded to become more open to conservatives' moral values and ethics, and being able to break the hypocognition that the Democrat Party has been able to build and cultivate through their media machines in major metropolitan areas.
Okay, so our number one issue isn't racism, and you just said that you aren't saying that, and okay, I acknowledge and respect that. But our number one issue also isn't the Democrat Party. Our number one issue is ourselves. We've been set against ourselves culturally, and that's been going on for a century.
Are you saying within the black community or the country, the number one issues within ourselves?
There is no such thing as the black community, for one. But just to basically finish what I was saying, prior to the 60s, if there is such a thing as a black community, it was such, especially in the South, where you did have this church oriented, family oriented success that was going on, where we were economically successful. We were quite proud to be Americans. To be Americans, we were productive, such and so forth. Around about the '60s, there was a mindset shift that took place, and that mindset shift gave way to this new spirit, the spirit of entitlement. And round about the '70s, where you have the the Great Society, from which you get all these different social programs and policies that de-incentivize productivity. Um, the demoralization was such to where it got worse and worse and worse, and here we are today. There are many Black people in this country who are successful, who are doing quite well. You do have pockets of the so-called Black community that aren't doing so great in some of our inner cities and some of our urban areas. And that's not indicative of a racist society. That's indicative of a mindset. Mindset is everything. There are white people who are doing terrible in this country. There are Hispanics who are doing terrible in this country. There's even Asians who are doing terrible in this country. And it's all due to culture and mindset. It has nothing to do with race. And so to pretend that you just talked about earlier the N-word and whether or not I've been called an N-word. Not that I recall, but even if I were, so who cares? I mean, like being called the N-word isn't the thing that's going to do me in. There are shitty people in the world. They range from conservative to liberal to whatever. I'm not shocked or surprised that there are shitty people in the world. And I'm not going to bend over backwards and tie myself in a knot because somebody called me the N-word. And so I feel like to go along with this narrative that racism exists and therefore we must be troubled by that, whether you call yourself a conservative or a liberal, I think that it's counterproductive. And what you're doing is you're kind of validating this kind of spirit of paranoia that debilitates people and gives people an excuse not to actually go for the opportunities that are available for us here in this country. And I know that seems like it's kind of all over the place in the way that I just explained it, but I don't know. I think that this is a very complex conversation, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It doesn't have to be a very complex concept. I think we choose to make it because we want to over intellectualize everything and not bring it down to the basic fact of the world is fallen, the world is broken. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to cry? Are you going to complain? Or are you going to get your butt to work? Thankfully, we live in a country that is so mobile, that is so that has such an ethical undergird where we do have the ability to make it regardless of who we are, where we come from, and what your background is. So
so I heard a lot of things there. I think I'm going to try and capture just a couple of them. So racism is not, I think we agree, racism is not the predominant issue in American society. It is not, it does not have the gripping effect on our society that it once did in terms of laws, Jim Crow laws. There's been a lot of things that have come to fruition, from the 1964 Civil Rights Act to, Brown versus Board of Education. There's been a lot of great things that have happened to where you and myself, we have not experienced racism nowhere near in the form that our grandparents or even our parents. My dad was born in 1955, right? The year Brown versus Board of Education was passed, and he wasn't able to start elementary school on time because they didn't want to integrate the schools in the South. Like that happened to my father, right? So racism is a thing that is not multiple generations removed, where it just like doesn't exist.
but even that I push back
And doesn't still have an impact in our country, right? So like you can look as recently as 1994 from the crime bill that was passed by Joe Biden, how it caused the mass incarceration of the Black community, right? That's why we have the fatherlessness issue today, is because something that happened in a time It's not. It did. It happened. That's why there are lots of black men in prisons. That's why we have.
But the demoralization already took place. You're decontextualizing.
Hey, bro. Hey. See, right now you're doing what you accuse me of, what a lot of liberals do, which is I sat here, I was quiet, and I listened to you the whole time while you spoke. But now you're interjecting when I'm making valid points to try and deviate me off track to start having another side conversation. I'm not going to do that. We're going to talk, and I'm going to respond about racism in this country right now. So I would appreciate it if you gave me the same courtesy that I'm giving you. So you said racism doesn't exist. It's just not a thing here anymore. If that was true, if that was the case, then it wouldn't be an actual thing. It wouldn't be an actual word that's in the dictionary. Now, I agree with you in the context of the boogeyman and the thoughts and not caring about what people think. But there's a difference between what people think and what they put into action. So if you actually look up, I pulled up here the definition of the word racism, right? A belief or doctrine that inherent differences among various human racial groups determine cultural or individual achievement, usually involving the idea that one's own race is superior and has the right to dominate others, or that particular racial group is inferior to others. So that's just, a belief, a thought. That's something that you keep in your head, right? So if someone has that in their head, what is it? It's a thought. It's an idea. A thought and idea without any action, without any motion is what? It's a wish if you're awake, and it's a dream if you're asleep. But when you put action to it, also called institutional racism, a policy system of government that is associated with, originated in such a doctrine, and that favors members of the dominant racial or ethnic group, or has a neutral effect on their life experiences while discriminating against or harming members of other groups, ultimately serving to preserve a social status, economic advantage, or political power of a dominant group. That is what we are seeing in predominantly Democrat areas. And that's why, quite frankly, you said in something in your response, I think we clipped it up. Ben, can we play a clip of something, of what you said in response? I want to speak directly to what you mentioned. It's the volume isn't on. Can you turn volume on? It's not playing on the clip. Volume's still not on.
Honestly, not sure why the volume's not
okay.
playing.
No worries. I'm pretty sure Chad remembers what he said. Basically, you alluded to in saying that the reason why liberals call black conservatives Uncle Toms and Coons is to prevent us from being seen. Or are you listening? Or you're on your phone? You don't want to have this serious conversation?
I'm listening to you.
This isn't that serious to you?
I'm listening to you. Go on.
So basically, you said that what? Or do you want to say it again, or do you want me to tell you?
Go on.
Okay. So you said that liberals call us coons and Uncle Toms because they want to suppress us from being seen by other blacks and allowing them to grow and cultivate. So then what did you say?
I said, because here's the thing. So you said that it's people like me and what I said that causes folks to call us Uncle Toms and Coons and sellouts. You said that, right?
Yes, because the person the person you were referring to, the person who you were addressing in your video, said you act like and you speak as though, I think was to quote you verbatim, you speak as though racism doesn't exist, like it's not a thing.
And I said it's none of my business whether it exists or not. Okay, and so you said that it's people like me, and that comment in particular that causes liberals to call us Uncle Toms, Coons, and sellouts. Did you or did you not say that?
100%. That is definitely a part of it. 90%.
So here's the thing about folks like yourself. You approach these conversations in a very timid, docile way. You first and foremost yield to their presumptions and their presuppositions, and think that by doing that, you're going to somehow win an argument with a liberal. And so you take on this kind of attitude of apology, and then you try to fix things with a conservative perspective. But you've already lost the argument by virtue of the fact that you've yielded to their presupposition. I don't yield to their presupposition because it's based in lies. If you know who, for example, Saul Alinsky is, he wrote the book Rules for Radicals. And in it, he says it's up to the radical community organizer to create disenchantment and discontent with their rhetoric. They have to set the narrative, they have to set the tone, they have to set the definitions. Once you do that, you've already won the conversation. And so you, and what you just demonstrated about how the South was this racist hotbed and all this stuff, that's not factually true. It's just not. That's an exacerbation of the past, but it's not rooted in facts. It's not rooted in reality.
You're not
And
even
so let me finish. And so the whole purpose, and this goes back to the early 1900s, the turn of the 20th century. The purpose of calling somebody an Uncle Tom, and they started this with Booker T. Washington, is that they understood that Booker T. Washington was a threat to the talented 10th. Booker T. Washington was a threat to the so-called Black intellectuals who were subservient to the white socialists like Mary White Ovington and Carl Van Vechten and H.L. Mencken and others around about 1912. And so they wanted to be the leaders of Black folks. These were atheist Black men who called themselves the talented 10th. And in order to do that, they had to dethrone, if you will, the Booker T. Washington types, the individuals who taught productivity, who taught Christian ethics, who said that, you know what, we're not going to make it in this country by crying. We have to actually go from a crying race to a trying race. This is what they said. And so because Booker T. Washington had his Negro Business League and he was actually putting up real numbers, and not only that, you had white men who were the sons of slaveholders in the South listening to men like Booker T. Washington, and in their own volition, taking money from their estate and donating it to the Tuskegee Institute and other Black organizations because they understood, look, we have to live in the South with these people. We know that we can at least have an economic, a shared economic marketplace with them. And from that, you will get the relationship element. We can't force people to love each other through law, but we can at least get to know each other in the marketplace. And from there, learn to tolerate and respect and love one another. So they were actually doing that in the South. So that's first and foremost. When I said that the whole purpose of calling somebody like a Booker T. Washington or like myself and Uncle Tom is you want to remove that threat. You want to make that Black man look like he's an enemy to Black people and not an ally to Black people, not someone who can help and assist with Black uplift. And so because I want to undermine you and sabotage you, I'm going to call you an Uncle Tom. So that way other Black people, the Black masses, will look at you as not a friend, but an enemy. And therefore you're rendered ineffective. You're rendered voiceless. And I can then, with my sinister, conniving agenda of socialism and Marxism, come in and look as amiable to you, look like I'm your friend. And this is where you get your W.E.B. Du Boises. This is where you get your Al Sharptons. This is where you get your Jesse Jacksons and others who they're not doing anything but lining their own pockets. But meanwhile, they're lambasting folks like Marva Collins as the Uncle Toms, people like Booker T. Washington as the people who are your enemy. When in reality, if you look up Booker T. Washington, if you look up Marva Collins, if you look up the others, you'll see that they had a program and they had a mentality that if applied to the Black masses, we would be in a better place today than we actually are. We've gone the way of W.E.B. Du Bois. We've gone the way of Jesse Jackson. We've gone the way of Al Sharpton. And look what it's done to our cities. We're not doing so great in many of these areas. And so that's what I meant when I said the purpose of calling somebody an Uncle Tom, who is actually saying something that if applied can actually do you some good. That's the guy that you want to target as a threat and to ridicule in such a way that they're rendered ineffective. Just to give you a little bit of context.
Thank you for that context. I appreciate it.
My pleasure.
You mentioned, in the beginning about, being timid. You described me with a lot of characteristics that only someone who knows nothing about me or real world practical life experience, what they would say. So just to give you a little background about how timid and weak and docile, I think was the word you used, I am. So a little bit about my background. After high school, I joined the United States Marine Corps. I was in the infantry. I went on 3 combat deployments. I was in Ramadi when it was one of the most dangerous cities in the world, getting shot at every day. If you ask anybody who I served with in the Marine Corps how I acted or conducted myself, not a docile, timid guy. As I got out of the Marine Corps, I was actually pursuing a career in mixed martial arts. I got in cages and fought with other people because it's fun. It's a thing that I like to do. You can go ahead and on my Instagram, scroll through and look at some of those. I don't think after watching that you would see or describe me or my mindset, the way I approach fighting or life, as timid or docile. Now, outside of being in physical environments of imminent peril, mentally, I think I'm also a really incredibly strong person. That's why I have 2 degrees back there. I got my bachelor's and my master's degree in 4 years because I wanted to get it done quickly. I also have certificates from 2 different Ivy League universities because I like to be challenged. I'm not a timid, I'm not a docile guy. You know why? Because I've seen a lot of barriers and had a lot of challenges in my life. One of those is experiencing racism, something that you yourself have been fortunate not to experience. And so I think from my general observations between you and I and this conversation we had, what I'm hearing from you is somebody who's never experienced, by your own words, racism in this country. Try to tell somebody who told you that they have experienced racism, who their family has faced racism in this country firsthand. I've seen it, lived it, and dealt with it, that it's a real thing. But then you go on to continue to basically quote books because you haven't lived it, you haven't experienced it. The only thing that you know is what you read. And what it sounds like to me is, yes, some of the things that you described and talk about are part of the reasons why liberals call Black conservatives Uncle Tom. But I think from my experience from interning at think tanks, interning on Congress in both a member's office and a committee office, from briefly running from Congress and working on the former president's reelection campaign and going into Black communities. Yes, they're a real thing. You should probably try Strawberry Mansion, go to different parts of Atlanta, Philadelphia, Baltimore. There's communities where they're just predominantly Blacks. The reason why those people call us, and I've seen it and had these conversations with them firsthand, Uncle Toms and Coons, is because when people like you let silly things, and I'm saying this directly to your face, like that come out of your mouth, like racism isn't a thing and it doesn't exist, and you're telling Black folks in Black communities that you say don't exist, that racism doesn't exist, you sound the exact opposite, like what you described to them, because what they're hearing is come out of your mouth is what you hear non-Black conservatives say to you.
But you're building a straw man, because when have I said that racism?
Hey, I was quiet. I was quiet the whole time.
But when did I say you're
I was
lying?
quiet I was quiet the whole time. I was quiet the whole time, bro.
But you're
I was
lying,
quiet.
though, so.
I let you. I'm not lying, bro. I'm
When
not
did I
lying.
say racism
And I'm telling you, bro, as a Black conservative, like when you say race, when you tell me after I've experienced racism in Georgia, after I've seen it firsthand, that it doesn't exist, that you're wrong, bro. Just
lying,
flat
because
out.
I didn't say
It sounds silly. All right, whatever. We can run that back. Getting back to my point, the reason why, part of the reason why is because you sound like the non-Black conservative talking points that you hear a lot. What you hear a lot, because I hear it too. They say it to me all the time. You speak well, you're intelligent, you're articulate. There should be more Blacks. We wish there were more Blacks like you. And that's why you said in the video that we had queued up that doesn't work, that if Blacks were like me, they would be There's nobody that's going to be like you, bro. There's no one.
Misrepresentation of what I said, but okay.
It's not okay. Well, let's hey, see if you can cue that up. It's not a misrepresentation
It's
of
a
what you
total
said.
misrepresentation of what I
It's
said.
not a misrepresentation of what you said. Let me see if I can pull it up on my
Dude,
phone,
you
bro.
can't like
That's what
subtly
you said.
shift what I said and try to make a point that's complete and like basically your basis is completely wrong. I said that they know that if a young black kid were to follow in my footsteps, then they will be independent. And it's difficult for a liberal politician, a demagogue, to use a black person who's sufficient and independent. That's what I said. I didn't say if more black people were like me. Like you're completely misrepresenting what I said. The idea is to not allow somebody with my voice to be effective in the black community, because by me being effective in the black community, that will take a significant voting block away from politicians who, by your own admission, are taking advantage of black individuals for their own political power or whatever it is that they're trying to gain. And so, like, yeah, you're misrepresenting what I said.
Okay, well, if I'm misrepresenting what you said, or if I'm misinterpreting what you said, then that means you've done a horrible job of communicating effectively to me and to the people. Because
okay, Mr. Ivy League.
Because I didn't call myself Mr. Ivy League, and I'm not an Ivy League guy, man. I'm an Army brat. I grew up, I just work hard. I work my ass off. And so just like you said that you're capable of having opportunities if you work your ass off, yes, it's actually true. You can get to the places you want to go. You can be the person that you want to be. And despite the barriers that actually exist in this country, you can become the person that you want to become if you are willing to work hard. So yes, you want to call me Mr. Ivy League. Yeah, I got 2 certificates from them, and yeah, whatever. And I was accepted into the Emerging Leaders Program. Whatever. Okay, because I work hard. And anybody can do it despite the current challenges. And the problem is,
all power to you for going. I'm not knocking that. The reason I said that is because
it sure sounded like it when you said, "All right, Mr. Ivy League," all sarcastic and shit. That
was in response to what you just said. As somebody,
I'm surprised you actually showed up here. First of all, so I want to give you kudos for that, for actually taking the challenge and standing up here and talking to me and having a debate. But you definitely fit one of those 3 buckets that I fit in, where you're good at talking points. You've learned, you've read a bunch of Shelby Steele. You've read Robert Brown. Okay, well, you've read something to get this information that you got from whatever. But I'll tell you what you don't have. You don't have real life experience. You haven't. Why are you laughing? You don't. You said you've never experienced racism, and that racism is not a real thing.
Okay,
but I'm sitting here.
Let's slow it down.
No. Okay, we'll slow it down. I'm sitting here and telling you that black people in this country are still experiencing racism. I'm telling you that black people are seeing racism. I'm telling you that I have firsthand witnessed it myself in the South, in Georgia. My family has witnessed it firsthand. And you're sitting here like, oh, no, it's not a real thing. Yeah, because you know why? You haven't witnessed it. And when you talk like that, and with 2 black folks who have experienced it, you sound like an Uncle Tom. You sound like a coon. You sound like you're spitting out this narrative that just does not exist. And that's why black liberals don't take a lot of black conservatives serious, because you haven't experienced it, because you're so fortunate and you've been sheltered enough to the fact where you think that you're so privileged that I'm not even gonna say privileged. You're so fortunate because you've been so sheltered that you can't realize that other people in the world haven't had the same experiences than you. And then you want to go on and start saying that folks who have are weak, timid, docile, bro.
And that right there is the reason I said Mr. Ivy League, is because like you're taking these things that I said, you're twisting them just enough to then validate your own point. And so you're building, like you can't really depend on the sufficiency of your arguments alone. You have to go back and tweak what I said to then validate what you're trying to say. And that's why I'm laughing, because it's like we're not really having a real conversation, because you're not willing to be honest about what's really going on. And the thing is like you keep saying that you've experienced racism and comparatively I haven't, and therefore like I don't have a dog in the race or whatever. Like you don't even know my background. Like you don't even know where I come from. I didn't come from privilege, as you put it. Like we were lower middle class coming up with five. I have 4 siblings, and I'm right in the middle. I have a brother and sister older than me, and a brother and sister younger than me. So we came up on meager a meager income, and so to assume that you know my background and you know where I'm coming from, and that I come from privilege, and therefore I don't have a dog in a race or anything to say on the matter, is just completely asinine, to use your word. Now, let's slow this down, because you're saying that you've experienced all this racism. You when you went to Georgia and you went to this place and that place. What Talk to me a little bit about that racism. What was so racist to where now you are afraid to really, I don't know, just uh, tell the truth? What are your experiences with racism?
All right, so I'm going to get to that. Here's the truth, Chad. The truth is, I'm not twisting your words. I'm just using them and explaining to you your own words on why I said what I said, why I think, and why my stance still remains. So I'm telling you, and I have told you, and you just said, I have personally witnessed and experienced racism.
And what are they?
And I am personally telling you that I've seen it in my family, happened to my family. I've seen it. I lived in Illinois through physically seeing members of the Ku Klux Klan. I've been called. The reason why I'm saying you're very privileged and why I said you're fortunate is because you've lived a life and experience where you haven't seen it firsthand. That's fortunate. That's a good thing. I hope my daughter is privileged enough to grow up and live a life to not experience the things that I've experienced, not to be called a nigger to my face by more than one person. Okay. not to be denied banking privileges and banking rights because of my race, not to be in a yearbook have my name listed on the swim team, not as Harrison Floyd, but Colin Powell, right? to have people put things in my locker, right? Papers saying nigger, get out of here, all these different kind of things, not to be physically accosted and get into fights defending my brothers in North Carolina and being expelled from school in the 7th grade because somebody else wanted to call my brother a nigger and I punched him in the mouth and I got kicked out of school. All right. So for you to sit here and laugh at it makes me you're part of the problem, not the solution. You can't even identify and acknowledge that it's an issue and that people have had these experiences when someone's sitting right in front of you, another Black conservative is sitting right in front of you and saying, hey, this is a real thing, man. Like this actually happened to me. And it's not a joke. It does exist. There are institutions in our banking and government and policies that still exist today, right? The welfare state that still exists that locks the Black community in. Like these are still things that are going on. But because you're so fortunate to have not experienced it firsthand, you can go through life and act as though that it doesn't exist. That's good. I wish more people were that naive to the fact that it's just.
It has nothing to do with naivete at all. Like you're talking about like things that happen when you were kids and kids calling you nigger and all this stuff is like, dude, like kids are jerks.
There was just a clan. There was just a clan.
Kids are jerks. Like
yeah, I mean, and they were taught to it by their parents, who were taught to it by their parents, and it was passed down. And it's an idea. It's a cancer that permeates people's minds, and it will continue. It will continue to permeate and continue to grow until we acknowledge that it's a thing, and we say it's not right. And when people do it and act on it, right, that they're punished, and people feel safe and secure that it's not going to happen to them.
Okay, so you're saying that you were denied banking and all this because of the color of your skin and all this. Like the reason why you think that racism is this big boogeyman is because you're actually looking for it. And here's the thing about, unfortunately, about
I was looking to be called a nigger to my face.
yeah, you're looking for it. That's why you're looking for it. The thing is like you were basically subject to the same kind of propaganda that I was exposed to, and that many Black people are exposed to growing up. This idea that America is a racist country. It was basically reinforced when LeBron James said you can't go outside without the police looking to hunt you down. It was reinforced when Ta-Nehisi Coates said that to be Black is to go through the world seeing people do things that you cannot do, that you can't join in and do. It was reinforced when Nicole Hannah-Jones of the 1619 Project said that we have been fighting the monster of racism since 1619. It's constantly reinforced, and the purpose of it is to instill the spirit of paranoia in Black people that debilitates them, to where anything that happens, whether they're denied banking, whether somebody looks at them wrong, whatever the case may be, it's because of racism. It's because of the color of my skin. And it's like, dude, I choose not to live that way. I acknowledge first and foremost that the world is a broken place, that people have preferences, that people are, to use a vulgar word, shitty. And so again, to tie myself up in knots because somebody doesn't like me, because somebody said something about me. Like I choose not to live paranoid and afraid of the world. I choose to actually go for it. And so my thing is, like, I'm not going to sit here and talk about and feel sorry for myself all the ways that racism exists and keep us down. I grew up in a household with a mother who told me that racism is going to be a big obstacle when I go out into the world. We grew up watching movies like Rosewood and Roots and Beloved and The Color Purple and all these different movies that reinforce this kind of a narrative. And so whenever I became an adult, hell, I wasn't even an adult. I was about 16 or 17 years old. I decided to go out into the world and see if everything that I was taught that it was chalked up to be was real. And I found that no, it's actually not. And again, it's mindset. And I'm surprised that you, as a Black conservative, don't realize this. I mean, by your own admission, you went to the Ivy League schools, you did your tours, you got your education, you have your business, you have this, that, and the other. And so if anybody knows that mindset will set you up for success, it's you. But yet, the reason why I say that you're being counterproductive is because on the one hand, you're preaching that message, yes and amen. But on the other hand, you're pretending like racism is this big debilitating threat. And so for the people that you claim to care so much about in the inner city, the Black kid who needs to come out from under the spell of the Democrat controlled politicians and such and so forth. You're basically reinforcing that same kind of paranoid spirit that we've all been subject to on the one hand, but on the other hand, you're trying to give them this kind of conservative hope. And the thing is, like, they get so caught up on that the former thing that they don't even pay attention to the latter thing. And so because you think that that method will be effective for someone like me to come along and not even acknowledge what you call racism, you're saying that, oh, you are a threat to my method. You are a threat to my agenda. So I'm going to make a TikTok or Instagram video calling you out, saying that you're the reason that we're called Uncle Toms, because your approach is just not working. It hasn't worked and it won't work. It takes boldness. It takes courage to say, you know what? This whole narrative that these people are using to keep you under their spell is complete bogus. It's complete BS. White people don't want to see you fail. They want to see you succeed. Most of them, the mainstream of them, do. And to the extent that there are those who don't, who cares? You give them power when you spend your time worried about what they think of you. I choose not to care what they think about me. Like, I'm not going to let them ruin a business deal for me. I'm not going to let them determine where I can and can't live. I'm not going to let them and what they think determine anything about what I do and how I do it. I sleep great at night. knowing that these people exist, but I don't care. Your problem is that you care. So anyway,
So, first thing that I would like to do is invite you to come out to DC. I'll be happy to take you around and show you and let you talk to some actually real people who've experienced this firsthand so you can understand that it is a real thing and that the big barrier where it predominantly has a big impact on the Black community is in these major metropolitan areas heavily controlled by the Democratic Party, who traditionally have a history of racism. That's number one. I'm actually a little bit at a loss of words because I feel like I'm saying the same thing over and over and over and repeating it. And either I'm just not doing a good job of communicating my thoughts, or you're just a really bad listener. So I'm going to say it one more time. I'm going to say it again. I said earlier that racism is not the biggest issue in this country. There's a lot of other things. I think Russia, what they're doing with energy, their partnership with China, this energy currency play that's going on has a really, really big impact. I think the weakness in leadership from the current administration abroad is not only affecting our foreign policy, but it's causing a lot of social turmoil domestically. I think inflation, printing of money is going to do us in. I think there's a lot of other things that come first. Racism in this country, as I said before, is probably like 6, 7, or 8, like further down on the list. All right.
no,
But okay, whatever. But it is a real thing. It really does exist, and there are people who are affected by it in this country. I'm one of those people who I told you
No.
I've seen it. How can you tell me that I haven't experienced or seen racism?
this is why. Are you ready for the answer? And this is the reason why I'm glad you didn't win Congress, because the thing is like people like you run for political office under the banner of a Republican, and you get a lot of white people to donate money to you because you're a Black guy and you're a Republican and you're saying the things that people like. But then you get in office and you're pretty much feckless because you submit first and foremost to liberal narratives that don't get anybody anywhere or do anybody any good. And you're corruptible. Based on what you're saying, you are corruptible because you adhere to just false narratives. And so what you just said about how like our number one issue is Russia and inflation and all this stuff, and then you put racism at number 6. The one thing that you didn't include in any of that is personal responsibility. And this is why I said earlier that you think America is so racist because you're looking for racism. If you look for it, you'll find it. If you look for people not liking you, you'll find it. If you look for whatever it is that you convince yourself in your paranoid state keeps you behind, you'll find it. Because we don't take responsibility, Black, white, whatever. Our generation, like we're trained and taught and indoctrinated into believing that anything that's wrong in our lives is somebody else's fault. Our number one issue isn't Russia, even though I disagree wholeheartedly with our involvement in that whole debacle. Our number one issue isn't inflation, even though obviously I don't like inflation. These things are bad, understandably. But our number one issue is our failure to take responsibility. Our number one issue is blaming somebody else for our own failures and our own shortcomings. Our number one issue as a society and as a generation is we've lost the shame element, that we want to emulate the down and out instead of the best and brightest. That's our number one issue. The more people begin to take personal responsibility, the better off we'll be as a country, because people taking personal responsibility is a thing that made America great to begin with. With all of our warts and bruises, the thing that made America so great, the thing that makes America to this day the country that captures so many immigrants from all around the world, is the fact that we've dared to take advantage of opportunity. And you have to do that by first and foremost taking responsibility, regardless of your circumstances, regardless of who does and doesn't like you. And so whether or not you believe racism is the number one issue, you certainly let it allow it to be a determining factor. to such an extent that you are willing to come after somebody like me who's just educating people on why they should go for it and take responsibility for their own lives. So,
okay, great job on all the books that you've read. Great job on your whole monologue there. Chad, you're more than welcome to come out here. I'm happy to take you on a tour and show you around, let you see what real Black Americans are experiencing in this country. There's no way that I'm going to get through to you. I can see that, like you said, I've been indoctrinated. Okay, buddy. But I will say this. There's no boogeyman for me, and there will be no boogeyman for my daughter, because we're not afraid and running from anything. Marines don't run from the sound of danger and gunfire. We run towards it. I like a good challenge. I like taking advantage of opportunities. I like being tested. That's why I said, hey, bro, you want to come on and have this out and talk about it? I'm happy to do that with you, man to man. That shit turns me on, bro. I like it. And what I'm saying to you is not like what you're saying, that racism doesn't exist. I'm saying
that,
it does.
okay.
Okay. I'm saying that racism does exist. And in spite of it, you're correct. Like, what does make America great is the opportunity. That's why people from all around the world come here. But in spite of that, Black folks, Latinos, any other minority, LGBT community, they don't need to think that because they have this identifier in front of, American, that's going to hold them back. The biggest issue in this country is not lack of accountability. The biggest issue in this country is the victim mindset that people fall back on and think that because they're a victim, they are entitled to different forms of compensation. The biggest issue in this country is the victim mindset. All right. I am not a victim. I'm an ass kicker is what I am. I did it in the Marine Corps. I did it in college. I've done it in politics, and I'm about to do it in business. And despite the fact that racism does exist in this country, I'm not going to run from it and act like, no, it doesn't exist. And I'm not going to make excuses quoting other folks, W.B. Du Bois and Frederick Douglass. I'm going to say, so what, it exists. I'm still going to do the damn thing. I'm still going to make it happen. And
now you're trying to say what I've been saying.
Okay, I'm not saying what you've been saying. You've been saying something totally different. I appreciate your time.
Hey, but let me ask you this one question though. Let's say I can.
We need to wrap.
No, I understand. So let's say I concede to your notion that racism is this big boogeyman. Well, like what? How do we do away with it politically or otherwise?
There is no way to do away with racism. Racism is an idea. The only way that we'll ever get rid of racism is over generations and generations and generations of people being badass and saying, I'm not going to let it affect me. I'm going to keep pushing past it. And I'm going to raise my children to do the same thing, to be badasses and to go and get what they want, right? And to obtain the level that they want to achieve and not let it affect the way with an E that they're going to live their lives.
So back to my first video that you critiqued. That's basically what I said.
No, because you're saying it as an idea. Like, I don't care if there's racism in the country. I don't care that if somebody is racist. Well, if as long as it's an idea in somebody's head, then you are correct in that sense that, okay, it's moot because it doesn't come out. But that's not what racism is totally and wholly. It's also institutional, where there are acts where people take action to prevent barriers. And just because there's opportunities and ways that you can get around them, it doesn't mean that because those barriers are there that they're one, right, or two, that those barriers don't exist. They do exist. All right. It's a fact. And I'm more than happy if you ever want to come out here to show you and talk to other people besides myself, and you can look them in the eye and tell them that racism doesn't exist too, my man. All right.
Stop listening to Ibram X. Kendi. It's not doing you any good.
Okay, man. Cool. Have a great day. I appreciate the time and the conversation.
You do the same. I still respect you.
Likewise. Like I said, about 95% of the stuff that you say is like spot on, but that other 5%, and this is included, bro, like it does not help us out. It doesn't win us over. It doesn't win other folks over to come to our side, man. It's more detrimental. And I've seen that working on the former president's campaign, in these think tanks, on Congress, in policy. The biggest issue isn't folks going onto the Hill and becoming neutered or feckless. The biggest issue is them going up there and acting like this stuff doesn't exist, and then doing the my side, your side stuff with Democrats, instead of coming together in the middle and saying, hey, this is a thing that exists. There are other ways that we can solve it. So let's do this. Actually, I would like to invite you back. Let's have a conversation about how there are conservative solutions to liberal problems. I think that there are some out there, and we can have that conversation. What do you think?
Certainly.
All right, let's do it. We'll send the invite.
Let me ask you this question off the record or on the record, whatever. So there has been people, and if you go through my comment sections and stuff on my social media, you'll see them. And I can even send you messages from people, DMs that I get, who say that, Chad, I'm apolitical. I think both the Republican and Democrats are leading us down the wrong path. But when I listen to you, like, you're making a lot of sense, and you're making me think about a lot of these things. What do you say to those people if I'm so counterproductive and if I'm not effective in what I'm saying?
I don't think you're so counterproductive. I think 95% of the things that you say are very productive, but I think the 5% of things like we just discussed, that takes away from that 95% and it makes you less effective. That's what I think. And it immediately puts back up the wall for a lot of these Black liberals who came into a lot of Trump events and they wanted to have these conversations. But when they start hearing things like that, like racism doesn't exist, and I've had to deal with it firsthand. It's like, okay, these guys aren't real. They take it as a joke. You know what I'm saying? So we have to have a different approach in that sense. But it's a great question. We're out of time right now. I would love to follow up with it again and have another conversation. So I'll reach out to you and we'll connect and we'll make it happen. But I think we can have a whole hour-long conversation on that.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you, man. Appreciate your time.
Yep.